On today's show, some lottery luck as the coin flip worked out in the Houston Rockets' favor. They have the second best lottery odds this year. Then we take a look at James Borrego, who interviewed for the head coaching position for the Rockets, some of his track record as an NBA head coach. Plus, Ime Udoka is on deck with his interview expected this Wednesday. And then what can the Rockets learn from this version of the Sacramento Kings, who are now up 2-0 against the Warriors in the playoffs this season? All that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
Hey, Houston fans, I am so happy.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and a credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And man, does it feel good, the Rockets walking away with the best case scenario for their position as far as the lottery odds are concerned. They went down to a tiebreaker between them and the San Antonio Spurs, and the Rockets walked away victorious from the coin flip scenario.
Pray for Victor.
Pray for Victor, indeed. So for those unfamiliar, it's worth refreshing your mind really quickly, the percentage odds for how the lottery scenario works now that the Rockets have the second best lottery odds this season. But as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, in the gym, on your lunch break. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your very first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. Now, we're going to get into the coin flip, the lottery luck for the Rockets, and I'm also going to go ahead and just establish, what I believe to be like my top 6 kind of big board here, and I'm very curious to know yours, so I'd like for you to share that in the YouTube comments, who you envision as your top 6, your big board, your prospects for this Houston Rockets team. I'm going to also get into James Borrego, a little bit of Ime Udoka, some of the head coaching talk here in segment 2. And then to wrap up the show, segment 3, I do want to share a couple notes that I have about things that this Rockets team can possibly learn from the Sacramento Kings, who are up now 2-0 on the Golden State Warriors. The first time ever in Steph Curry's career that he has been down 2-0, or I guess 0-2, whatever, in a series. Talk about that a little bit later on. But so let me go ahead and get into just really quickly the percentages for the Rockets this go around. So it is worth noting, right? The bottom 3 teams, so Detroit, Houston, San Antonio, they all have the same percentage chance at a top 4 selection. But as the Rockets and the Spurs were tied up, they had to go to what the NBA calls the coin flips. And the coin flips basically were the tiebreakers for all of the draft picks, lottery scenarios, all that. And there's actually 2 coin flip scenarios that mattered to the Rockets. And they got the better of one and then the worst of the other, because the Clippers pick wound up going down to pick 20. So it could have been slightly better, that scenario for the Rockets. But, you take what you can get. The fact that the Rockets walk away with the second best odds for their pick, which is clearly the better of the 2, not the end of the world. So worth noting, the percentage chances for their pick, they have a 14% chance at pick number 1, a 13.4% chance at pick number 2, a 2.7% chance at pick number 3, and then a 12% chance at pick number 4. So those percentages are the same across the board for Detroit, Houston, and San Antonio. Where it shifts a little bit is now the worst the Rockets pick can be is pick number 6. That's the lowest their pick can go. So the floor is now locked in. And they have a 27.8% chance at landing on pick number 5, and they have a 20% chance at landing pick number 6. So those are the odds for where this Rockets pick will ultimately fall. And as I'm currently looking at the draft board, very clearly we've talked about ad nauseum, Victor Wembanyama, top of the draft board, top of everybody's board, and I get it. Maybe you're a little concerned about his injury history. Maybe you have another Greg Oden, Kevin Durant draft type situation on your hand where Wemby is clearly the guy you got to take number 1 overall. But what if he doesn't, what if his career never comes together? What if he deals with injuries? That's always a concern, right? But Wemby's your number 1. And Scoot Henderson, by and large, is most people's number 2 in this draft. There are some who would maybe rank Brandon Miller above him. I can understand the arguments for why you would maybe want to do that. But at the same time, I think for this Rockets organization and just in general, my view of Scoot Henderson as a prospect, I have him ranked above Brandon Miller. I do have Brandon Miller very comfortably in that 3rd spot on my big board. So that's half the spots already taken up, of the Rockets' available 6 slots of where their pick might land. Things start to get a little sticky in that 4 through 6 range because I think for the most part, you can look at 4 and a lot of people, a lot of draft experts, a lot of, people with, published big boards out there, fans, whatever, tend to have Amen Thompson in that 4th slot usually. And that's pretty much how I have my board as well. And then I round out my 5 and 6 spots. I've actually got Jarris Walker as 5th, and I've got Cam Whitmore at 6th. So that's my tentative Locked On Rockets top 6 big board for draft prospects. And first of all, I love Cam Whitmore. I think he would be a great fit, even though I will say, even though I've got those 6 as my top 6 prospects, I will say that with the caveat of I would fully expect this Rockets team to be heavily considering trading the pick if it does not land within the top 2. Maybe Brandon Miller is still, projects to be good enough right out of the gate as a player that maybe you still, think about, okay, you draft him at pick number 3 and maybe you just don't insert him in the starting lineup. Maybe you bring him off the bench behind a veteran small forward that you bring in this offseason, something along those lines. There's not anything that says he has to start next year, right? They could very easily do something like what the Indiana Pacers did with Benedict Mathurin this season, right? Draft Brandon Miller, bring him off the bench, let him, get 20, 25 minutes a night, very low pressure, low stakes in that role. So, but if it's 3 through 6, man, I think the Rockets are going to be looking to possibly move on from that pick and add a bit more of a veteran, more of an established presence to the roster. For whether that's right or wrong is a different conversation. Those are just my expectations for how they're going to handle it. What I want to know from you, now that we lock in, we know the lottery luck, we know where the Rockets percentages stand, I want to know what your top 6 are. Give me your top 6 in the YouTube comments. Give me your tentative top 6 big board. Is it identical to mine? Is it shifted a little bit? Are you higher or lower on certain guys? Let me know in the YouTube comments. But coming up, I do want to get into some of the Rockets head coaching discussion. James Borrego with his interview for the Rockets head coaching position. Would he be an upgrade at the head coaching position compared to Stephen Silas? Is this the Rockets just doing their due diligence? Is it really them kind of interviewing him on the sly, looking to possibly maybe bring him in as a lead assistant? Also, Ime Udoka with his interview on deck. All of that and more coming up here in just one moment. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Look, when you're trying to go out and have a good time and you're trying to maybe hit up a game or going to a concert or whatever it may be, right? Last minute event, you shouldn't be stressing about trying to figure out your ticket situation, right? You're trying to go out and have a good time. You shouldn't have to worry. Game Time can help you with that. They have flash deals on last minute tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every event in your area, right? Whether it's the theater, whether it's a game, basketball, baseball, whatever it might be. Could be a concert. Game Time can get you the hookup. They've got images of whatever your seats are going to look like, so you know exactly the bang that you are getting for your buck. It's the fastest growing ticketing app out there. It's so convenient, so easy to use. Save the worry, save the stress, and just make it easier on yourself to figure out your ticketing situation with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your very first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your very first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Houston Rockets head coaching search update number 17 million. I don't know. It feels like we're going to get like some version of an update to the head coaching search in every episode until it finally comes to fruition and they make their decision. Latest updates include former Charlotte Hornets head coach James Borrego interviewing for the head coaching position with the Rockets, as well as the news breaking via Kelly Iko of The Athletic that Ime Udoka would be scheduled to interview with the Houston Rockets this upcoming Wednesday, which is exciting because, again, Udoka is that name on the list that I think has the chance to leapfrog Frank Vogel. James Borrego, a good coach in his own right, not necessarily, I think, on the same tier as some of the other potential head coaching options. Again, a bit more of a limited track record as a head coach, although it's worth noting, I do think like the reception to Borrego, similar to Frank Vogel in a sense, was a little like undeserved from Rockets fans. Like Rockets fans were treating it like, oh, Borrego's a trash coach. Like he's not, I wouldn't want James Borrego. Borrego actually did like a decent number with the Hornets the 4 years that he was there. Like he wasn't, first off, he really wasn't given much to work with. And he actually exceeded expectations, if you, depending on whatever you define as expectations, right? I'm talking the expected win-loss record for the Hornets. He actually exceeded that ever so slightly, by a skosh, every year that he was there in Charlotte. So, for example, let me make sure I can see this properly. So his first season in Charlotte was the 2018-2019 season. Their expected win-loss record was 38-44, 19th of 30 teams in the NBA. They actually wound up finishing 39-43, so one win better than that, and got them to, or I apologize, the play-in tournament did not exist quite just yet that season. Then the following year, we go to the 2019-2020 season, the introduction of the play-in tournament, the introduction of the COVID bubble season, all that. Again, the Hornets' expected record that season was 19-46. They were expected to be the third worst team in the NBA. They actually finished 23-42. So a significant little bit of a jump there. And in addition, it's worth noting that first season, the Hornets were actually the 12th rated offense in the NBA and then the 22nd rated defense in the NBA. So actually not bad numbers from the 2018-2019 Hornets squad. They regressed quite a bit that following year. And I think that was expected, right? That was the year that they were bad enough, and then they walked away with LaMelo. So then they get rookie year LaMelo in 2020-2021 season. That year, their expected win-loss was 32-40. They wound up finishing 33-39, getting them to 10th in the Eastern Conference. So again, play-in bound with not a very solid roster, all things considered. And then Borrego's final season as the head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, 2021-2022, their expected win-loss record was 42-40. They finished 43-39, 10th in the Eastern Conference. Again, play-in bound. They were the 9th rated offense, and then they were the 23rd rated defense. So, I think all things considered, given what he had to work with in Charlotte, Borrego did the most with what he had, right? Like, again, he was flirting with a top 10 offense for 2 out of his 4 years that he was there. He had the one really down year that ultimately, turned into them drafting LaMelo Ball. And then after getting LaMelo Ball, like they had some success. So it's one of those situations where, Borrego did his 4 years and it was just time for the Hornets to move on, find a new voice, change of scenery, change things up in the locker room. Not necessarily that Borrego is a bad coach. Now, does that mean he is a, qualified head coaching candidate for the Rockets? To an extent. Would I be disappointed if the Rockets hired Borrego as their outright head coach? Probably a little bit. Would he be an upgrade over Steven Silas? Absolutely. Would he be, on the same level as any of the other candidates that are currently in the running? Definitely, probably not, right? And I think that's where you come away with a little bit of the concern is throughout this hiring process, right? You don't want to see the Rockets cop out and pick a B tier or a C tier head coach, even though that coach might be a very distinct upgrade over Steven Silas and might be a significantly better fit for this group of guys. You want to see this Rockets team and this organization go all out on picking the best possible coach available, right? You do not want to see them shy away from this. You don't want to see them cut any corners with the head coaching hire, and that's why there's a lot of onus on the organization to make the right decision here. And obviously the Rockets are going to have some competition on the marketplace. There's going to be other teams that are looking at these exact same pool of candidates, but you got to imagine this Rockets opportunity is a very attractive position, and it's only, there's only 30 spots in the NBA to coach an NBA basketball team, and the Rockets have one of those spots open, and it's a very rare, prestigious opportunity for any of these, available free agent head coaches to jump at. So it might not be the pristine win now contender scenario that they've envisioned in their minds, but it's definitely a situation where you can see the bright side, you can see the vision and the future for what this team can ultimately become. Now, if I had to wager, I'd say that the Rockets are probably looking at Borrego and hopefully wanting to try and bring him in as what would be a lead assistant, given the types of other head coaches that are available on the marketplace, right? Frank Vogel, defensive-minded. Ime Udoka, defensive-minded. Nick Nurse, still very creative, but, a more leans and skews more defensive-minded as a head coach. Any number of those guys, you grab any one of those three, and you throw in a James Borrego as their lead assistant. First off, that's very clearly two guys that are capable of being head coaches in their own right. So that's a lot of brain power, a lot of basketball knowledge sitting on the sidelines, and that doesn't even include whatever the rest of the assistant coaching staff would ultimately look like. But I would be over the moon if the Rockets landed on any one of those first three names, Vogel, Udoka, Nurse, and then also complemented that individual by adding in a James Borrego as a lead assistant, right? And for Borrego, right, he takes the season off. He, takes a bit of a backseat this season. After being the head coach for the Hornets for 4 years. That's not uncommon in NBA landscapes, right? Once you have a long head coaching stint, like I wouldn't be shocked if Steven Silas takes maybe a year off before getting back in the saddle and looking to become an assistant with a different organization elsewhere. Or maybe you're just, maybe if you're Silas, you're ready to try and, rinse the taste out of the this Rockets experience out of your mouth, so to speak, with how these last 3 years went. But for Borrego, he took this past season off, right? Recoup, reassess what he can do as a head coach. It probably helps him to be able to get back in the saddle as a lead assistant somewhere and be able to say, yeah, I worked alongside this, XYZ head coach, whatever. And it's worth noting that Borrego and Udoka have a pre-existing relationship, because Udoka was actually a player with the San Antonio Spurs when Udoka was a player when Borrego was originally on the sidelines as a coach with San Antonio. Then Borrego left and did a couple stints elsewhere. He wound up going to New Orleans. Then he spent a little time with the Orlando Magic. Then he made it back to the San Antonio Spurs in 2015. And by that point, Udoka was an assistant coach with the Spurs on Greg Popovich's staff. So they met each other originally while Udoka was a player and Borrego was a coach. And then they became coaching assistants together under Greg Popovich. So they're both from that Popovich coaching tree. They've both worked together before. And I really wonder if that's going to be something that plays into a potential dynamic here down the line. If the Rockets do ultimately settle on Ime Udoka as their next head coach, will they be able to pitch it to Borrego and say, hey, man, you've worked with this guy before. Want to come work with him again? It could be a very interesting opportunity for not only for Borrego, but for the Rockets to be able to have that much coaching power on their sidelines moving forward. Very distinct upgrades, possibly. And then, as previously stated, Ime Udoka scheduled for his interview with the Houston Rockets Wednesday afternoon. I did hear that, again, Frank Vogel crushed it in his interview. I heard similar things about Borrego, not necessarily that he knocked out of the park, but very solid interview. And, at this point, with where the Rockets are at, wouldn't be the worst choice. Still not in my top tier list of candidates. And I'm very curious to see what the reception is like for Udoka, because right now it very much feels like he is second on the Rockets list, but with a strong enough interview, I very much firmly believe that he could leapfrog Frank Vogel and become the number one guy on the Rockets' big board of coaches, if that's how we want to kind of categorize things. So very exciting times for the Houston Rockets. A lot of work being put in around the head coaching search. And also, we're still waiting kind of with bated breath to see what happens with Nick Nurse, right? All signs are pointing toward the Raptors likely to let him go. The Rockets can't officially pursue anything with him until he is formally released from the Raptors. But when that moment happens, you can rest assured that the news, the reporting, all of it's going to break that Nick Nurse is setting up an interview with the Rockets. It's pretty much all but a guaranteed outcome at this point. We're just waiting for the formalities to go ahead and happen. With that, coming up, I do want to get into the Sacramento Kings and the fact that they are up 2-0 on the Warriors. First time Steph Curry has been down 0-2 in a series ever in his career. What are a couple of the lessons that the Houston Rockets can learn from this Sacramento Kings ball club? We're going to get there in just one moment, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. All right, next game. How about Joel Embiid to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Kevin Durant to have less than 6.5 assists? Or what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other players. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. That's NBA, MLB, NHL, NFL, PGA. They've got you covered for all of the sporting action. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that simple. They're safe. They offer fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. So don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. And I realized coming into this final segment that I did you a disservice, the listener. I did you a disservice. I did not run a Tankathon spin in that first segment. We got all hyped about Pray for Victor and the coin flips and the lottery odds and ran down all the numbers. And I even had it in my notes. Do a Tankathon spin. What I need is I need a Post-it note. I used to keep a Post-it note on my monitor, like in previous years, of just run a spin, do a spin, right? Just right there on the top, so I would never forget to do one. I need to go back to like the old, analog style. Put a Post-it note up so I don't forget to do the spin. I will do its spin before the end of the episode. I owe you that much because, again, we can't talk about the Rockets and the lottery odds and this, that, and the other thing without acknowledging things with a Tankathon spin. So we will do that at some point before the end of the episode. But I do want to get into the Sacramento Kings and their success so far in the series against the Golden State Warriors. Is the Warriors dynasty starting to show some cracks? Quite possibly. Down 0-2 for the first time in Steph Curry's career. But what really stood out to me, right, is first off, just the resiliency of this Kings team and how they're able to weather like these haymakers that the Warriors are so known for throwing in these playoff type games, atmospheres, right, where the Warriors will go on a 10-0 run, 12-2 run, 14-2 run, whatever. And, those haymakers that the Warriors are capable of throwing when they drain, multiple threes in a row, they get a bunch of backdoor cuts going, like they're able to just manufacture points in a hurry. And those are usually the runs that kind of like start to bury a team and they, start to suffocate an opponent. The Kings just kind of like, they absorb the run and they're like, all right, cool. And then they go on their own like 6-0, 8-0, 10-0 run of themselves because they're such a high octane, potent offense. They play with such insane pace. They've got great creators in De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis. Everybody on the court for the Kings is capable of like putting the ball on the floor and making something happen. They're all threats to score the basketball. It's really beautiful what the Kings have accomplished and how they've really revamped themselves top to bottom over the course of one offseason. And that leads me into my very first point of 2 points that I want to make here about what the Rockets can learn from this Sacramento Kings team. And the first is Mike Brown, brought in as the Kings head coach this offseason, largely regarded as a defensive guy for the majority of his career, right? Mike Brown, defensive guy. Everywhere he's been before this, as a head coach, as an assistant, he's always been, oh yeah, Mike Brown, that's the defense guy, right? So then how exactly did he walk into the Kings and make them a high-octane, one of the best offenses in the NBA, right? It's because coaches, much like players, are always growing and, the good ones at least, are always growing, developing, adapting, and changing and getting better, ideally, right? And Mike Brown is a guy who's been on the coaching scene for a long, long time. He's had various different head coaching stints. And most recently, before taking on the Kings job, right, he was an assistant with the Warriors, getting championship level experience with the Warriors alongside Steve Kerr and the rest of the basketball staff there. So very clearly, he's picked up a thing or two. So it's very possible for some of these assistants that the Rockets are looking at, or some of these possible head coaches that the Rockets are looking at, to step into this role. And maybe it is a Frank Vogel, right? Maybe Frank Vogel's sitting on the sidelines this season and he's, picking up things. He's learning new things. He's understanding how to approach things. Vogel already has two very different head coaching experiences on his resume, right? The very young and talented Indiana Pacers team that he did in the Eastern Conference, and then the older veteran-laden team with the Lakers, spearheaded by LeBron and AD, right? Those were two very different teams, and he found a great deal of success with both of them, right? Ime Udoka, a lot of success in his first stint as a head coach with the Celtics, right? Found a way to make a perimeter-oriented offense work with Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, right? Maybe that's something that the Rockets are enticed by with the fact that they've got Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. on deck, right? Two heavily perimeter-oriented players. Maybe that's exactly the type of guy that they need to find some success with those guys. Nick Nurse, again, another defensive-oriented guy. It's basically, my point here is simply to say, just because a guy has a reputation as a defense type of guy doesn't necessarily mean that they are incapable of coaching offense, right? Or that's it's a guarantee. Oh, you hire Mike Brown, you're not going to be a good offensive team. You're going to be a terrible offensive team, right? I remember Kings fans were, kind of perplexed by the Mike Brown hire, right? A lot of Kings fans didn't like the hire. And he walked in and proved every single one of them wrong. So all I want to say is, whoever the Rockets settle on for their next head coach, as long as it is very clearly one of the upper echelon candidates and it doesn't appear that the Rockets are cheaping out on the hiring process and settling for a less than candidate because they weren't able to push all their chips into the center of the table, then give that person a chance, right? Whether it's Nurse, whether it is Udoka, Vogel, possibly Atkinson, right? As long as it's somebody that we think can legitimately be a solid head coaching opportunity. And maybe even you extend the kindness to a guy like a James Borrego, right? Maybe one of the guys who's not quite on that same tier as the other guys. Although, again, I personally wouldn't. I think that's where maybe the cutoff is, where you're like, okay, like what happened? Why weren't you able to secure one of the top names on the market? Point being, give whoever the next head coach is a chance. Because very clearly, Mike Brown did something special in Sacramento, right? And it worked. And it's resonating with the players. And they're clearly doing something very, very solid over there. So I'm not expecting that type of a jump. I'm not expecting the Rockets to be the 3 seed in the NBA in the Western Conference next season. But the right coach is going to be able to get the most out of this group of guys, regardless of whatever his, possible affinity is or his association with, basketball court, offense, defense, whatever his prior track record looked like, all that stuff. And that's where you got to trust that this Rockets organization is going to do their due diligence and ultimately hire the right guy for this group of basketball players. So that's my first point. My second point is Domantas Sabonis. There was a lot of chatter about his play in Game 1 and his struggles against the Warriors. And a lot of people were like, see, you can't play a guy like Sabonis in the playoffs. He's going to get played off the court, right? The Kings or the Warriors are targeting him on defense. They're sagging off of him on offense because he can't shoot. He's not going to be effective. He's going to be a liability on the court. And then guess what? Game 2, he's the Kings' best player. So I think first off, A, don't overreact to a 1-game sample size. And B, the more success that this Kings team has in the playoffs, the more of a precedent there is for Alperen Sengun continuing to be the starting center for the Houston Rockets. And there's more and more evidence as to there being success if you lean further into what Sengun can do. Because I think there's a very realistic outcome, a top-end outcome, where Sengun is either at an equivalent level to Sabonis or exceeds Sabonis's on-court production and abilities one day in his career. And the fact that the Rockets have a player like that and have all the tools and pieces to potentially mimic a Sacramento Kings blueprint as far as like approach, style of play, all that, it's incredibly exciting. And the right next head coach will see that and probably see that vision and hopefully tap into that vision and utilizing Sengun as a bit more of a focal point offensively, an offensive hub, all that. And, Ime Udoka might be at home watching the playoffs, licking his chops, Nick Nurse, whatever, seeing what the Kings are doing and thinking, man, I can't wait to get my hands on that Sengun kid, right? That Turkish kid's going to be so good for my offense. It's going to make it so easy to run actions, split cut actions, all this kind of stuff, DHOs, and just, do them in a more effective and creative way than what we saw the Rockets doing for the majority of this past season. So that's what I wanted to point out there is, again, there's a lot that the Rockets can learn from this Sacramento Kings team, and the more success that this Kings team has this postseason bodes well for the future of Alperen Sengun as a Houston Rocket. So with that, I do want to get to our Tankathon spin, and I hope that I'm not going to break this. Can I float this here? And that's the wrong button. All right, slightly. Hang on. I broke it. Let me do this. Production value error here at the show. Oh, there we go. Okay, it's cool. I figured it out. I knew exactly where I needed to be, and I got the Tankathon spin lined up a little bit. Let me line this up just a little bit better over there. Okay, cool. Still learning the production value tricks with this new layout. But with that, let's go ahead and run a Tankathon spin. Seeing as how the Rockets won the coin flip, they can fall no lower than 6th on the board. Where do you think the pick is going to land? Think about it for a second. Concentrate hard, and in your heart of hearts, remember.
Pray for Victor.
Pray for Victor. Let's go ahead and run the spin. Let's see where they land. You know what? I'm feeling pretty good. I've had some pretty, frankly, pretty awful rolls here at LOR, but after the coin flip luck, maybe things are starting to turn around. Let's see what happens. Okay. Well, not horrendous. The top pick is not great. Utah jumps up all the way to the number 1 slot. So Utah gets... Dude, imagine Wemby just getting banished to Utah. So they move on from one French big man, and they get another French big man. That's kind of hilarious. The Rockets stay at pick number 2, though, which is a great consolation prize. It's not even a consolation prize. Scoot Henderson's going to be fantastic. Love that number 2 overall pick. San Antonio stays put at number 3. You got Indiana at number 4, Detroit at number 5, and then, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the rest of the lottery list down the line. But with that, that's better than my usual rolls have been here at LOR. So, I'll take what I can get at this point as far as the Tankathon lottery luck is concerned. We do not have much further to go, right? Less than a month to the NBA draft lottery as we all wait very impatiently for that fateful day to ultimately come to fruition to find out what direction the Rockets are going to be able to go with their lottery selection this season. But that's going to do it for today's episode. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app. Free and available on all podcast platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Give me your top 6. Give me your preemptive Rockets big board as it relates to where the Rockets pick may ultimately land at the top of this year's NBA draft. Give me your thoughts on James Borrego. Tell me what you feel about the couple takes that I had from the Sacramento Kings. All that. Give me all your thoughts in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.